Welcome to Codex, a history of video games. My name's Tyler Osby.
And I'm Mike Coletta.
And this week, we're continuing our Metroidvania coverage with a little bit of Castlevania here. This is your wheelhouse, Mike, because while I've played a lot of Metroid games, I don't know if I've put any significant time into a Castlevania game, so I'm very excited to learn more about what people love about Castlevania.
Well, that's interesting because this is my wheelhouse, but I have also never put any time into a Castlevania game. So I am learning from scratch this episode.
Sweet.
This is one of those game series that I feel like I should have played a ton, and
Me
I
too.
just never did. Yeah, and it's not intentional. Even though the game's a little bit spooky, it's not going to scare me. You know, I'm a grown man. I should play this. I'm a man, is what I tell myself. Like, I'm a man.
as you push you blow on the cartridge and you go, I'm a man, and you push this in.
I'm going to play Castlevania. Okay, so let's start with the grind facts. I'm trying to make sure I keep doing this every episode. You know, have some consistency. So, developed by Konami, it was released on the Famicom Disk System first on September 26, 1986 in Japan only, and then it came to the NES Famicom, NES and the Famicom so that's the normal cartridge version that we all know and love in North America on May 1st, 1987, in the PAL region of December 19th, 1988, and then in Japan way later on the Famicom, February 5th, 1993.
Oh, because it came out on the disc system first. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, because the disc system.
So it's not like they didn't have Castlevania until '93. They just didn't have the cartridge version. Okay.
They had it for 7 years on disc, you know, so it's good. Okay, it also came out on something called the Play Choice 10 and the Nintendo VS system.
I can tell you what those are.
You can? All right.
Yes, they were arcade systems, and they had a few games built into them. At least the Versus system. The Play Choice 10, I feel like now I need to Google. I think it's like the same kind of deal where it was like an arcade where you put in your quarters and you would play Super Mario Brothers in the arcade. Actually, you remember Silverwood in Idaho, right? That theme park?
Oh, that theme park I never went to.
You never went to Silverwood?
No, there were trips to Silverwood with all our friends in college. Tyler and I went to college together, full disclosure. And I never got to go. It was always like a scheduling conflict.
Oh, that's so sad because it's fun.
Hey,
okay, well then this doesn't mean
man, do you want to fly to Idaho and go to Silverwood?
I would totally go to Silverwood again. Anyway, they had a couple of these. The Versus system was okay. So I think I know the difference here. The Play Choice 10 was like an arcade cabinet. You put your quarters in, you play Super Mario Brothers, or there were a few NES games that you could choose from. The Versus system was like two of those put together, and you could play multiplayer, like score attack or against each other somehow. I don't know
so
exactly.
It's like it's Versus. It's not Nintendo VS. It's the Versus.
Yeah,
system.
it's the Versus. Yeah, and they were like right next to each other, and the idea was you were competing, or I think just competing. I don't know if there's any co-op stuff.
How do
but
you
anyway,
compete in Castlevania?
Scores probably.
Yeah, that's true. I guess
I don't know.
Whoever dies first. It seems very intense.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, Silverwood had one of those for a period of time, but if you've never been there, that doesn't mean anything to you. Welcome to Codex, a history of obscure theme parks in Western Idaho.
that would be a thing I would. That's a podcast I'd listen to. You know,
if you've ever been to Silverwood, send us an email.
Yeah, actually, that'd be. Oh man, I hope we get an email. Okay, so they came out on the C64, the Amiga, and MS DOS in 1990, and then it came out on mobile phone in 2002 in Japan, and then 2004 everywhere else.
Interesting.
And Game Boy Advance had a version of Castlevania that came out in 2004 and 2005, depending on where you lived. The way that I'm going to say, this is like generic how you play all three games we're going to talk about this episode. Get the Castlevania Anniversary Collection. It's a compilation of almost like all of these early Castlevania games. It's definitely missing some, and it's very controversial to true fans how there's certain games missing out of this. I read some really hot and bothered Steam reviews. Okay, so just know, if you want to play this, though, I recommend Castlevania Anniversary Collection. I missed the boat. It was on sale 2 weeks ago on Switch, and I had no idea, and I missed it.
Oh, bummer.
So I'm just waiting for it to go on sale again. But it's got like a lot of games in it, and it came out for Konami's 50th anniversary. So that's what I would do if you were interested in playing these games now. Number of copies sold, there's kind of a pattern here with all these games. I couldn't really find accurate sales data for this, so unfortunately we're just going to have to skip this section on this podcast. But you can go listen to Sales Decks, a history of video game sales, if you want to do that. So
it probably did fine.
They probably found that information for you. But genre or gameplay style, it's an action platformer, and it's one of the first to do the things it did, which is really cool. It had actually like no formal game awards in the awards, accolades, or groundbreaking achievement section, but this is considered like the start of the Metroidvania. This is the Vania of Metroidvania, so it has a very big legacy. Average time to complete this game, according to howlongtobeat.com, is 3 to 6 hours. There is no Metacritic score for the NES version because it's too old, but the Game Boy Advanced version has a score of 74 out of 100. So there's that on Metacritic. Plot, what's going on? So the plot of this game is pretty simple. You are Simon Belmont. You are a vampire hunter that comes from a long line family of vampire hunters. You know how I know you're a vampire hunter? You own a whip, and the name of that whip is Vampire Killer. And you got to go kill Count Dracula.
Yeah, you can't name your whip Vampire Killer if you don't kill vampires with it.
Yeah, then you're just a big poser, you know? Mm-hmm. Also, very creative name, Vampire Killer. So, also, we're going to do this for these games, too, when I cover Castlevania, because it's probably going to be, like, not necessarily a string of episodes in a row. We're going to kind of switch it up, but when I come back to it, we will have, much like we did with Zelda, chronological story time, because this game takes place over a timeline that jumps time periods, but lucky for us, unlike Zelda, not universes. So it'll be a little less confusing than Zelda.
Okay.
But this game is actually like kind of dead center in the middle of the timeline. It's 1691 AD, and you play as the fourth Belmont, Simon. And this is 100 years before the last event of Dracula, where Christopher Belmont defeated Dracula. Yeah. Gameplay wise, as I said before, it is a platformer. Your main weapon is a whip, and you get secondary weapons also. You can only carry one secondary weapon at a time, and you lose it on death. And the secondary weapons available in the first Castlevania game are the dagger, axe, cross, holy water, and stopwatch. The game takes place over 18 stages, and they are separated into 6 blocks of 3 stages each. And the block is like an actual term from Castlevania. Like, you're like, what block are you on? You know, that's how you'd talk if you want to know the lingo, you know? Mm-hmm. So you start the game with 4 lives and 5 hearts. Hearts have nothing to do with your health, interestingly enough. You get hearts from dead enemies, and they let you use essentially the ammo for your secondary weapon, is how hearts are. So hearts are super valuable. You also collect points, and those points actually do something, unlike giving you a score at the end of the game. When you hit 30,000 points, the first time you hit 30,000, you get an extra life. After that, every 50,000 points, you get an extra life. So it's definitely worth trying to collect points. Mm-hmm. You want to have a high score so you have more lives. There's a slight delay when you use your whip attack. That's a pretty important part of this whole game, too, because it kind of takes some timing and skill. Dare I say skill in a video game?
Skill in your video games?
Get out of here. So other hidden items include point bonuses. They look kind of like bags of money. There's temporary invincibility, upgrades to the whip's length and power, instant destruction of all on-screen enemies, and then they let you have a power-up that lets you like double or triple the use of your backup weapon. From what I saw when I watched the long play of this game, if you want to play this game, my number one life advice I can give you is start whipping some candles, okay? Because candles all over the map have hearts in them, and those are super valuable. So that is my TLDR tip. Whip a candle into shape.
Okay, thanks. In real life?
In real life, buy a bullwhip on Amazon or whatever. Start whipping candles.
Name it Vampire Killer.
Yeah, name it Vampire. Right on the side of it in Sharpie, Vampire Killer. Whip candles, and then get the game, and then do that same thing, but in the video game, and you're good to go.
All right.
Some people think you need to skip the first physical training part. That's not true. You need to do both.
That's probably why I never got into this game as a kid.
You couldn't get a real bullwhip. Your parents wouldn't let you. I understand.
Nah.
So there's actually some pretty iconic bosses on top of Dracula in this game, and for a very good reason we're going to talk about it in a second. But you usually encounter a boss at the end of each block. The first one is a giant phantom bat. The second one's Medusa. There is no boss in block 3. Instead, there's like a gauntlet thing that I'll talk about in a second. Frankenstein and Igor are in block 4. Another gauntlet in block 5, and then finally Dracula. So you're actually fighting like movie bad guys from horror films. Ooh. And there is a reason for that. But this gauntlet thing, by the way, usually what they do is they bring back an enemy that you fought as a boss before, and now it's something you got to like dodge. You know, you can fight it, but you just got to kind of run through. It's kind of like a gauntlet kind of thing. That's what I'm calling it. I don't know if that's the correct terminology, but that's kind of how I saw it.
Okay.
So, why do you have all of these iconic movie bad guys? Well, the director of Castlevania, Hitoshi Akamatsu, loved cinema, specifically horror cinema. And the entire idea, the concept of Castlevania, is he wanted the players to feel like they were in a classic horror film. So that's why you fight like Frankenstein and Igor. And that's why you like the opening scene is you walking up to the gates and you're walking inside. It's like supposed to kind of like invoke a mood, you know?
Yeah, okay. I'm on board. Cool. I'm on board.
And they did this on the NES, which is pretty crazy when you think about it, you know? So the international name of Castlevania was the result of Konami of America Senior Vice President Emil Heidkamp being very, very uncomfortable with the original title of Akumajo Dracula, which was like, I think it translated to like devil. Oh, can you look it up for me what the actual name translates to? I only wrote down what he thought it translated to. Heidkamp apparently thought it meant Dracula's satanic castle, but it's something else. I want to say it's like Devil Dracula Castle or something like that. And so he was kind of worried with like, because again, we're talking Nintendo here. You know, so religious connotations are kind of scary to them as a company. So
Google Translate isn't telling me anything here.
Really?
Devil's Castle Dracula is what Wikipedia says.
Yes, Devil's Castle Dracula is what it is. And so but because Emil Heidkamp thought it was Dracula Satanic Castle, for some reason that made it like 800 times worse.
Satanic is right out in Nintendo's rules.
Yeah, they really don't like Satanism in Nintendo. You know, if you're looking for a video game company that enjoys Satanism, you need to move away from Nintendo. Sorry.
They must have got over that with.
No, I don't.
They must have got over that with Shin Megami Tensei. 'Cause there's a lot of satanic stuff going on in those games.
Oh yeah, I feel like games now it's like a lot of Satan stuff. You know, all about it.
But back in the day, no Satan stuff.
No Satan stuff. Back then in the 80s and 90s, absolutely not. So Castlevania was the first major platform game on the NES and a part of an unofficial second wave of video games that came out on the NES. And the reason it's called Castlevania is because, I mean, it's in a castle and then Transylvania, and they just put them together. But the release of the game, it actually came out on the 90th anniversary of Bram Stoker's Dracula. Isn't that kind of cool?
Well, how about that?
Yeah. So the player character Simon was originally going to be called Peter Dante, who is a vampire killer who was the grandson of Christopher Dante, who's another like figure, you know, in that kind of a genre. But they switched it to Belmont instead to kind of start their own thing. And at the time, the whip attacks were actually planned to be like in multiple directions. Like you'd whip once and then whip the other way. And
you would say you whip it back and forth?
You whip it back and forth. That's what you do.
Yeah. Okay.
And they actually changed that to just a single whip attack with that delay on it. But in Super Castlevania 4, that multiple whip thing happens. So it's kind of like, oh, they never forgot about it, you know? Mm-hmm. They were going to do other sub-weapons, secondary weapons that were like a garlic, a wooden stake, and then something that transforms the player character into a werewolf, but they pulled that from the game, which is a bummer.
That sounds cool.
Yeah, right? It sounds so cool. The game was titled Akumaju Dracula, but sorry, I'm messing up my own speech here. There was a game that was also titled Akumajo Dracula, and that game came out for the MSX2. And so this is kind of confusing. There's Castlevania as we know it, but there was also this branch that came out on the MSX2 that was very, very similar, released by Konami, came out in Europe under the title Vampire Killer, but it's technically a little bit different from Castlevania. It's got some different areas, a different structure. It feels similar, but it's kind of like Castlevania's cousin, is how I would describe it. The cover art of Castlevania is actually heavily influenced from a famous 1972 painting by Frank Frazetta called Norseman. And I want you right now, if you are safe and available. If you're driving a car, don't do this, obviously. But when you go home or work or wherever you're going, Google this painting and then Google the cover art for Castlevania, and you'll just be like, wow, they just straight up ripped this from the painting. It's pretty nuts.
Wow, I just did that, and you are correct. It's just a straight up ripoff. Wow.
The only difference is they add Dracula's spooky face in the top left. I think.
And he's got a whip. He doesn't have a whip in the original paint. He's got like a polearm kind of thing.
Yeah, but if you also look at a teaser poster, the second teaser poster for the Netflix series that's recent, that's going on now, that's called Castlevania, their second teaser poster is also based on this painting and is also extremely similar.
Yeah, yep, I can see it.
Yeah, so it's kind of weird. They like using these famous paintings and these imagery, which is cool. But yeah, that's Castlevania 1. Castlevania 2, Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest, was also developed by Konami.
Was the first one not Simon's Quest? Was that someone else's quest?
It was Simon, but it was not called Simon's Quest. This is Castlevania 2 subtitle, Simon's Quest.
Simon's Quest, yeah. Well, I'm just trying to think, that doesn't differentiate it, you know? Like, it doesn't say anything new about it. I don't know anything if it's because the first game was also Simon's Quest.
It kind of does, but you don't know because you got to play it. There's something that happens. It's like you don't even know, Tyler, okay?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, because like Zelda 2 has a subtitle, The Adventure of Link. And I'm like, wasn't the first one also The Adventure of Link? Couldn't you just put that as a subtitle for any Zelda game? So
that's true. But I mean, this was also like 1987 naming conventions. So
why bother? Just Castlevania 2. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I actually agree with you there. I know when we were calling BioShock 3, when we were calling BioShock Infinite, BioShock 3, it was confusing to people, but that's because I honestly I just want to use shorthand, you know, like make it snappy, you know. BioShock Infinite, that's a lot of words to say, but yeah, Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest released on the Famicom Disk System in Japan on August 28th, 1987, and then on the NES cartridge on December 1st, 1988, and in the PAL territories in April 27th, 1990. Once again, an action platformer. This game actually has gotten some rankings, like it's been on some top lists of NES games in magazines, and I kind of wrote those down here for Simon's Quest because I'm going to kind of do like an overview of this game. I'm going to do an overview of all three games at the end, and this is definitely the game that's like kind of the most hated on, is how I would put it.
Okay. Like Zelda 2. So many parallels to Zelda 2 here.
Yeah, it's hated on for a specific reason, though, and I'll talk about it in a bit. But so in 2008, Nintendo Power ranked this as the 15th best NES game, and they compared it to Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link. Wow, that's what I had written down. And Tyler's been sitting here spitting the truth for the last 5 minutes. Okay.
Dropping truth bombs.
In 1997, Castlevania Retrospective, GamePro called it an excellent time killer and much longer than the first Castlevania. I don't know if that's like a really good... I don't want to call a game a time killer. Does that make sense? If I was like reviewing a game?
Yeah. I mean, I guess back in the day when games weren't quite on the level that they are now, like games are experiences now, and they're like art form. Not that they weren't back then too, but they're like, there's so much more to games now than there was back then. Like back then people played games. That's what they were. That's why they were just time killers. Right. So I think like being called an excellent time killer is like, this is an excellent game.
Yeah.
Because that's what games were
compliment.
for. Yeah. I think it's a good compliment for the day. Nowadays, I think if somebody says this is a good time killer, I'd be like, then why wouldn't I play literally any other game that's way more fun?
Yeah, the next one, too, is kind of weird. IGN called Simon's Quest, quote, the perfect game to play during 1989. Which doesn't feel like
Was 1989 a particularly boring year?
I guess. That's when the year when it came out. It doesn't really seem like it's a good compliment, though. But they all dug it. They all dug it. All
right.
I'll explain more about that in a bit. But yeah, the average time to complete this game is 4 to 5 hours. The Metacritic score, it doesn't have one. But most gaming news outlets at the time gave it a 7 out of 10, which is good. You didn't really see a lot of 9s out of 10s or 10 out of 10 in the 80s, I feel like. You know, very critical.
Yeah, they had very high standards.
Yeah. Okay, so this is plot-wise 1698. So this is 7 years, chronologically speaking, 7 years after Simon Belmont originally defeated the evil Count Dracula. We're still in the exact same like time period as the first game. No jump here. Not too confusing. But here's why it's called Simon's Quest. Spoiler territory for Castlevania 1 right here. Okay. After you kill Dracula in Castlevania 1, Dracula curses you. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah, he puts a curse on you that says you're going to go to an early grave. So the quest of Simon's quest is you have to take Vampire Killer, your legendary creatively named whip, and travel the land to 5 different towns: Jova, Veros, Algeba, Aldra, and Oldon. Oh, no, not 7 towns, I guess. Fetra and Goulash. There's 5 parts of, and I'm getting confused here, but there's towns you can go to, but you have to recover the 5 body parts, gross, of Count Dracula, and then take those to his castle, and then kill him again to get rid of the curse.
Oh, dang.
So there's all those towns, but there's 5 dark manors: the Berkeley, Rover, Brahms, Bodley, and Laruba manors. And those are the places where the Count's body parts are found. So the reason this is kind of not thought of as highly as the like Castlevania 1 or Castlevania 3 is because Simon's Quest is a very big departure from the original Castlevania. It's no longer linear like the first Castlevania. It's still a platformer, but they add open world RPG elements to the game.
Okay.
And the game is actually more, I say, by the way, I'm going to keep saying open world, which is not entirely accurate. I feel like if you say open world nowadays, people think like Assassin's Creed or GTA. When I'm using the term open world here, I mean, there's no like level structure. Like you can go back.
There's an overworld and you can kind of move forward and backward where you've been.
Exactly. Yeah, okay. Just to avoid some confusion. This game is actually inspired more by a game called Maze of Gallius. In fact, when the director of the game, same director as the first game, by the way, okay? This is 100% still Hitoshi Akamatsu's game, okay? Was asked if Metroid was an influence for this game. He said, no, it's not Metroid. I actually took more from this game called The Maze of Gallius, which is a 1987 NES game that was also developed by Konami. And that game also has these RPG open world kind of elements to the game. So once again, Simon's Quest has a world map, which the player is free to explore and revisit. You can talk to those villagers in the towns, and they can give you clues, or, and this is the fun part, they will straight up lie to you and tell you the wrong places to go, which I think is fantastic.
That's so mean.
I know, right? This game's all about dishonesty. There are merchants that sell items now, even whips. You can buy new whips, but why would you want to replace your trusty Vampire Killer? And those items are sold for hearts. So hearts is now the currency, which is cool because hearts actually do
it's pretty morbid.
Yeah, right?
You just carrying around all these beating hearts.
Hey, I'd like to get that longsword, and here is a bucket of hearts I can give you. Gross. So Simon's Quest actually introduces an XP system as well. So this is even more role-playing. And your XP increases as you collect hearts. And after you find a certain amount of hearts, then your level goes up and your maximum health goes up, and you're great. You're doing a good job. The other cool thing about Castlevania II, see, I actually like these changes. I think it's kind of cool how they developed these changes, but we'll talk about, like, you'll see when I talk about Castlevania 3 why this one's kind of not, like, looked down upon a little bit. They track your time in this game. There is a day-night cycle in Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest. And during the day, you can talk to villagers, and the enemies are all weaker if you go fight enemies during the day. And at night, you can't talk to villagers anymore. They're replaced by zombies, and the enemies are stronger. They do more damage to you, but they drop more hearts, so you level up more.
Oh, okay. So you can go do some level grinding at night and then talk to people during the day.
Yeah, but you don't want to do too much grinding, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. Okay, so secondary items are back in this game. Some are magical, some are not. They all cost hearts. Some cost hearts to use, and some don't cost hearts to use, which I think is kind of cool that they're unlimited. We're only going to focus on Dracula's magical body parts, which is a phrase I should never say again on a podcast. But there's a long list of weapons. If you want to go check it out, you can. So Dracula's magical body parts, I did it again, are quest items that you need, and they provide passive effects. So, for example, the nail, like as in his fingernail, allows the player to destroy certain blocks on the map with the whip. The eyeball allows the player to see items hidden inside breakable blocks. The rib bone grants a temporary shield if you're standing still that repels most projectiles, which I think is super powerful. It's not temporary either. It just sits there as a shield.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. The ring opens the entrance to Dracula's castle along with the cross, which is another item you buy. And Dracula's heart allows the ferryman at the Dead River to take the player to Brahm's mansion. So you need these items to go to certain other mansions as well. As I mentioned in the plot, you need all 5 of these items to clear the blockade in front of Dracula's castle and fight the last boss. And then after you beat Dracula, presuming you do, the game checks how long it took you to beat the game using that day-night cycle system, and then gives you a different ending based on how long it took you. So that's why you don't want to grind too long. If you beat the game in 8 days or less, you're going to get the good ending. If you beat the game in 15 days or more, you're going to get the bad ending. And there's also a middle ending in between.
Okay.
So, yeah, so you want to grind. You can, but you don't want to get that bad ending.
Right, so it's risk reward. You know, you're risking a bad ending if you grind.
Yeah, it also would be terrible, too, because if you didn't know that playing the first time, it's like, oh, I got to play it again and get the good ending, you know?
Yeah.
There's someone out there. It took them 16 days to beat Dracula. Never looked it up again because they played the game in 1987. And now they think that ending's the real ending, and it's not.
They're like, it's a bad ending. Why would I play this game anymore? They put it down. They're so disappointed with the ending. They're like, this game's stupid.
They probably stopped playing video games altogether.
Yeah, they probably quit forever.
Or racquetball.
They're like, I have better ways to kill my time.
That's right. This is not the best time killer of 1989. All right, so let's talk about development real quick. Simon's Quest was designed once again, as I said before, by Hitoshi Akamatsu, who directed Castlevania and Castlevania III Dracula's Curse, which is the other NES game we're going to talk about today. It was originally titled Dracula II in Japan, and Akamatsu was the one that created the subtitle Simon's Quest, so you could release it in Western territories, because as you know, they changed the name to Castlevania, and they didn't like Castlevania II, which is strange. Because we had this discussion already, but you know.
At least I know whose quest it is. You know, if I didn't know whose quest it was, I might have left that one on the shelf back in 1989.
Yeah. So it was eventually, this game was converted to cartridge for the NES in North America and in Europe as well. And there are actually some significant differences in how the game runs when you play on cartridge in North America or Europe, or the Famicom Disk System in Japan. One big one is the FDS, the Famicom Disk System, has a save feature, which is awesome. If you're playing on NES, it's time to get those passwords written down because you're going to need them to get back to where you were. The Famicom Disk System also had a certain data storage limitation to it. But it was like 112 kilobytes of slow access, where there were bank switching techniques and solid memory costs that allowed cartridges to have comparable data space with much faster access. So the cartridge was actually better for this than the discs were. And what the developers used that extra space for on the cartridges was to improve the music quality. So unlike every other game we've talked about on a disc, the music is better on cartridge in Castlevania II, Simon's Quest, than on the Famicom Disk System, because Famicom Disk System, I believe their discs were floppies.
Very small.
Yeah, so cartridges were better than floppies, but CD-ROMs were greater than cartridges, if you're caring about that thing historically. Some other things they did is they tried to correct grammar and spelling errors in the translation of the game on cartridge, but they definitely missed some. So the protagonist's name is called Simon Belmont, Simmon, in the endings instead of Simon, because they missed that.
Castlevania II, Simmons Quest?
Simmons Quest. Richard Simmons' quest to kill Dracula. So most of the artwork...
Very different game.
Yeah, very, very different game. A lot more jazzercise in that game than the previous ones. So most of the original artwork for Simon's Quest and other early Castlevania games, this is kind of a tragic note, were lost because of the Great Hanshin earthquake of 1995. So there's not as much old documentation on this game as other older games. So
that's too bad.
Yeah. There were a lot of re-releases for Simon's Quest, though. On November 16th, 2002, the game was included in the Konami Collector's Series, Castlevania and Contra in North America. There's a PC collection of the Konami NES games that you could play. It was emulated, I believe. There also are the Nintendo Virtual Console versions of the game, because all these games came out on the Wii console and the Wii U console, if I recall. And what's a bummer is this game was included on the NES Classic Edition, the actual like physical NES Classic Edition, but it is not in the emulators that are on Switch, the built-in emulators you get with it, because of the Castlevania Anniversary Collection, as I mentioned before.
Oh, they're trying to sell them to you separately. That makes sense.
Yeah, so they're not included in that, which was a bummer because I was like, oh, that might be how I play this. And it's like, nope, you can't. So yeah, let's move on to Castlevania 3. So Castlevania 3 was developed by Konami, same developer. It was released on the NES and the Famicom at the same time in Japan on December 22nd, 1989, North America, September 1st, 1990, and in Europe on December 10th, 1992. It is on the Wii Virtual Console in 2008, 2009, and on the 3DS Virtual Console in 2014, which seems really late, and the Wii U console in 2014. When I say Wii U console, I mean Virtual Console, so to avoid confusion. Again, also on the Castlevania Anniversary Collection. That's the best way to play it. Highly recommend. That's how you play it, if you want to play these NES games anyway. It is an action platformer. There are no official rewards, but as I kind of hinted to before, to many press gaming news outlets, this is the best Castlevania game on the NES because it introduced some really cool mechanics and characters that would be used in later Castlevania games. Gotcha. IGN actually placed Castlevania III Dracula's Curse as 5th on their list of the top 100 NES games. So,
wow.
Yeah.
I want to know what their other top 5 are.
This is also where the plot of the 2017 to 2020 Netflix series that's going on, this is where it's based from, is this game. So,
gotcha.
If you want to catch up to the story, you can watch this Netflix show, which is actually pretty good. I've watched it. It's pretty cool.
I've heard good things about it. I wasn't really interested in it because I don't have a whole lot of experience with Castlevania, but I've heard it's a good show.
Yeah. By the way, this doesn't have a Metacritic score, and I propose a new term. It's TODR. Too old, didn't read. Too old, didn't review.
Too old, didn't review. I like it.
Yeah, so it's TODR. It's too old, didn't review. That's what we'll say. The plot-wise, though, chronologically, this is the second Belmont in the Belmont lineage. We're talking about Trevor Belmont. So this is a prequel to those first 2 Castlevania games on the NES. It takes place in 1476. I actually pulled this from the Castlevania wiki, which I use as a resource actually way more for these episodes than I did for any other game wikis. The Castlevania wiki is really, really well done. Whoever made that.
Pretty detailed.
Yeah, the collection of people that made that, you're doing great work. But here's their plot synopsis for this game. In 1476, the genocide of humanity begins at the hand of Count Dracula.
Holy moly.
Yeah, right? This is spooky. Alerted to Dracula's existence, a secret team is sent by the Eastern Orthodox Church to find and eliminate him. All attempts to suppress Dracula end in failure. So faced with no other options, the church turns to the Belmont family of vampire hunters in hopes they could destroy Dracula. By the way, there's something in the story, too, that's not mentioned here. The church doesn't like the Belmonts because they do spooky magic. That's kind of like the
Gotcha.
whole...
So this is like they're having to be friends with the people they don't really like.
Yeah, you're essentially the Eastern Orthodox Church's Suicide Squad, if you will. But you're a one-man Suicide Squad. Okay, so Trevor Belmont begins his journey into the castle and frees 3 new playable characters. This is super important. They are Sypha Belnades, Grant Dynasty, who's a pirate, and Sypha is a sorceress, and Alucard, who is Dracula's son, also Dracula spelled backwards, if anyone's paying attention. So yeah, this game it completely abandons the Simon's Quest Castlevania II stuff, gets rid of the RPG, gets rid of the open world. And it really came back to the original roots of the first Castlevania, but way improved on it. So those 3 companions you find will actually join you. And it's both of you can have one at a time, and they're on the screen with you, and you can press the select button and switch between Trevor and your partner, whoever it is, and they all have special powers. So Sypha is a sorceress with like really powerful elemental magic. Grant Dynasty is a pirate who can climb on walls and change direction mid-jump, which is a huge ability in these early games because you couldn't change direction in any older Castlevania game.
Oh.
If you jump right, you're going right.
You're going right. There's no turning back.
Yeah, no take backsies with jumping. And then Alucard is a Dampier, which is a vampire that is like, it's got different powers, I think.
Okay, is that like half vampire? Is that like a demigod or something?
I think so. I think it's a half vampire situation. But you can shoot fireballs and turn into a bat. So what's cool about this game is it gets rid of all the stuff they did in Simon's Quest, goes back to old Castlevania 1, and adds these 3 new characters to really spice it up. And they also, instead of doing like an open world like in in Simon's Quest, they do... The castle has 2 main routes you can take through it. There's an upper route, which is kind of easier, and a lower route, which is harder. But each one has different people that you can add to your party. And,
cool.
Yeah, and like the upper route goes through like the castle's front gate, and the lower route goes through the tunnels and caverns, and then you have to scale the cliffside to get into the castle. It's pretty cool. And also, depending on who you beat the game with, or if you beat the game alone, there are 4 different endings to Dracula's Curse. So if you beat the character with Alucard, you're going to get a different ending than if you beat it with Grant, for example.
Okay, so there's reason to play through the game multiple times with different characters.
There is. And it also I think the reason that people really like this one is it just took, like, Castlevania 1 was not broken, so why try to fix it with Castlevania 2? Oh, that was wrong? Okay, we'll go back to Castlevania 3 and essentially redo Castlevania 1, but add these cool new characters and add this like kind of different style of navigation to the castle, and just it's way better. Way better. So
I dig it. Sounds awesome.
Yeah. The Castlevania 3, if we're going to talk about development for a little bit, it actually is the first game in the series to actually have like a connection, like an actual connection with Dracula and the real life historical figure Vlad III, aka Vlad the Impaler. The game drew a lot of inspiration from Bram Stoker's novel, and then it actually states that Dracula is an evil sorcerer, which was also brought forward in the novel. So it's not just like making it up and kind of going with the classic movie horror villain approach. They're trying to use the novel more as like they're citing their source this time. The only difference being that in the novel, he became a vampire after his death, whereas in the game, Dracula gets his powers from an evil deity. That's like the one main difference. This is also like in the 15th century instead of the 17th century. So this is actually the year that the real Tepes in the story actually died. And this is the official date given in the series timeline, which was published later on. Like I said, the timeline for this game is kind of confusing. So I'm just going to kind of brush upon it. We're not going to get into a history of Castlevania timelines, but I will kind of mention where we're at so you know what's going on when we talk about the
I appreciate
games.
that.
The character of Alucard is another movie reference, with which once again fits into the style of the game. His name, Alucard, which is just Dracula spelled backwards, is actually taken from the 1943 film Son of Dracula, which I didn't know. So really, you should blame the directors and writers of the 1943 film Son of Dracula for making Alucard a name. But it's really weird how Alucard does sound like it fits in the Dracula universe.
It does, definitely.
Yeah, so, maybe they found something genius, and I'm just being a hater. Okay, Grant's Japanese name is given as Grant Dynasty, which is, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Again, welcome back to Codex, a history of Mike butchering the Japanese language. But it's actually a reference to a historical house who rebelled against Vlad Dracula, but were later persecuted. So this actually fits well with Grant's role in the game, but it's never mentioned he's of noble lineage in the game, but it's just another like little historical fact.
Just kind of a wink to the people who know. If you know kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like, oh, look at this reference. Cool. I didn't actually find a lot about like why they made the choice development wise to kind of go back on everything they did in Simon's Quest. But I did find out there were some very big differences between the US version of Castlevania 3 and the Japanese version of Castlevania 3. So we're going to talk about those for a little bit. The Japanese version has way better sound because the cartridge in the Japanese version uses the newer VRC6 coprocessor chip, whereas the older the NES in the US uses the older MMC5 chip. So they made the game with this new VRC6 coprocessor chip. And actually the audio programmer Hidenori Mizawa actually created this chip for the game and then had to actively downgrade it to make it work.
Bummer. Was it just too expensive? Is that why, like, they did it in Japan? They were like, oh, this was a mistake. And so when they came to the US, they were like, make it cheaper.
Yeah, basically. Or they just didn't want to bring that technology over. You know, I'm not entirely sure. Again, this could go back to the whole, like, you know, we're still in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s here, where I think the console market in Japan was way more popular than the console market in the US. So that could have something to do with it, you know? They don't really say anything why. That would be why I have to guess, though. It would be that. So instead of using a stabbing dagger in the NES North American version, Grant throws his dagger as the main attack in the Japanese version. Some enemies do less damage in the Japanese version. The sprites were changed for the North American release because some of them had nudity and religious iconography. And as you know, Nintendo's like, absolutely not. No naked people or religious stuff.
Especially not in the US. In Japan, maybe it can slip by, but not in the US.
But not in the US. So the Japanese version also has slightly different backgrounds in many of the different stages and has special effects that are not seen in the North American and European versions of the game. But here are two other fun facts about Castlevania 3. In the North American and PAL versions, unlike the Japanese versions, they do have some hidden features that can be accessed by entering a certain name for the player. So if you want to start the game with 10 lives, just write "help me" as the player's name, which I think is kind of funny. You could also start the game with any of the 3 partners like instantly if you type in a different name, and those are not in the Japanese version, which is pretty funny. So you could actually like type funny names in. I think, and isn't it in like a Zelda game, if you type a different name in, it does something?
Yeah, if you name your character Zelda in the original Zelda, you get a different overworld and like the dungeons are different. And
That's right. Okay.
It's a whole second quest, a master quest, if you will.
Gotcha. I knew we talked about that. Okay, so Castlevania 3 was also the first game in the series to have different artwork based on the region. So outside of Japan, the artwork was painted by Tom Dubois, and it was inspired by Ray Harryhausen, who does art like their artwork. And Dubois would actually go on to design the North American packaging for Super Castlevania IV, Castlevania II, Belmont's Revenge, and Castlevania Bloodlines. So this is like the start of a long relationship of making artwork for Castlevania, which I thought was pretty cool.
Wow.
So legacy-wise, if I'm going to wrap this all up, I think that the third in the series is definitely what people think about when they think about Castlevania, because it brought forth Trevor, Alucard, Sypha, and Grant, who are like 4 big characters in the series. But I would say the second game, even though it's listed as like the worst of the 3, I still feel like that has the most like experimental backtracking, open up hidden passages kind of route to it. That's a little bit more like Metroid, you know? Mm-hmm. And that might be even more Metroidvania than the first and the third game are.
Okay.
I missed the boat on these, by the way. The Switch had a sale on the Castlevania Anniversary Collection 2 weeks ago, and I missed the boat on it completely. I don't have a PlayStation, otherwise I could have gotten it on that. But that's 100% what I think you should get if you want to play this game, Castlevania Anniversary Collection. Or if you're like me and you just want to skip to what everyone considers the real banger of the series, I am going to try to pick up Castlevania Symphony of the Night, because that had a remake on the 360 and is backwards compatible on Xbox One. So I'm going to look that up later tonight and see if it's on there because
I think that is generally considered like the best or most famous one anyway.
Yeah, that's the Castlevania game that we're kind of leading to because that's the one that is considered the all-time best, I think. So sources wise, I didn't really watch as much YouTube for this. I did watch some long plays, but I did use the Castlevania wiki a lot for this. And so if you have any questions or like you feel like you're like want to know more, the Castlevania.fandom.com wiki, like it's great. I actually found the Castlevania timeline that kind of broke it all down game by game, like where each game falls. So that was kind of cool. But yeah, I'm actually excited to keep going with this and talk more about Castlevania. I'm into it now. But
cool. I'm excited to hear more.
Tyler, what you been playing?
This week, most of my gaming has been World of Warcraft. Still getting to the end of what I feel like will be this current run of World of Warcraft. Our goal right now is to beat the last boss of the raid on the heroic difficulty, which is not the hardest difficulty, but basically it's the only one that's like attainable by a mere mortal. Because if you do that before the next raid comes out, you get an achievement for it. So I want to get that achievement. Funny enough, that raid is very like Castlevania, like Dracula vampire.
It really
theme,
is.
So it kind of fits the theme of the show. So yeah, I'm hoping we can get that done sometime this week. I think and clear out that last boss and get that achievement. Otherwise, I put a little bit more time into Modern Warfare 2, and I've been spending a lot of time watching my SO play through the Uncharted series. She's almost done with the third Uncharted. She's probably started them like last weekend. So. We're burning through those games. Yeah, that's been fun to watch too. So that, and I also started up Super Mario Galaxy. I don't know if I'll stick with it. I played through Mario Galaxy a bunch of times before, but I started up the 3D World, like the anniversary, not 3D World, the 3D All-Stars. Yeah, anniversary. Speaking of 3D World though, that comes out this Friday. I'll be getting that and putting in a lot of time on that probably. So hopefully this time next week, when you ask me what you've been playing, it's just going to be a lot of Super Mario 3D World.
Is that the one with the Bowser thing and Giga Cat Mario?
Yeah, Giga Cat Mario.
I'm going to be purchasing that as well, I think. I don't really buy games new, but I am all about this.
It's my favorite Mario, like 3D Mario game. It's so good. So that's, I think that about covers what I've been playing. What have you been playing, Mike?
Well, speaking of Mario, I beat the story section of Super Mario Maker, so now I'm just playing worlds that people created for funsies in my spare time, which is cool. I have been playing some more Destiny 2. I beat the Beyond Light campaign, and I think I'm just kind of going to stop when I feel like it. Like, I feel good. I feel fine. I'm like, this is great. It was free because I had Game Pass. Well, it's not free, but it felt free. So
yeah, well, it was no extra charge.
Yeah, and then that was fun. I do regret not playing Deepstone Crypt. I wanted to play that raid really bad, and I've heard it's actually really fun, and it's also easier than a lot of the older raids we played.
Is that the raid, the Beyond Light raid?
That is the Beyond Light raid, and apparently it was easier. So what I've done is I haven't really been looking on Xbox because honestly, the game plays so poorly on my Xbox One.
Ooh.
It's not bad when you're actually playing and fighting. When you're like running around and jumping, it feels fine. It's definitely 30 frames per second, but it doesn't feel great. When it's bad is the menus.
It takes a long time to load.
Yeah, I just can't load the menus, and it's actually a problem. Like, you die because you're trying to like wait for your guns to load so you can change them, and you're like, oh, this is kind of lame. So I think if it goes on sale on PC, I'll pick it up, but I'm not going to spend full money.
Yeah, I'll probably grab it if it goes on sale, I think.
Yeah, that's the way to go. But I played that, and then Apex Legends had a new update to it. That's the game I play with some of my friends from college that I really like. That's how we keep in touch, And there's a new guy on it named Fuse, and he shoots grenades, and it's actually like super broken and fun is how I'll describe it. He can shoot a grenade like across the map. It's insane.
Wow.
Because he shoots it out of like a launcher thing. It's like his special power. And I was like hitting people from so far away, and I'm like, I don't even care if I like kill anybody in the game. I just want to do these trick shots, like because they're so silly. And they also like redid the Kings Canyon map, which is something I care. I don't even know if any of our listeners play Apex. I might be the only person that plays it, but it's me and a bunch of people trying to be Twitch streamers that are really good at it.
Yeah, I downloaded it. I'm looking to maybe fire it up one of these days.
Do you have it on PC?
I do, yeah.
I've been playing it on Xbox.
It's got crossplay?
Does have crossplay, and you'll be on mouse and keyboard, which means you can get super sweaty, right?
Yeah,
and
that's the plan.
You can carry me.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of crossplay and mouse and keyboard, super sweaty. I did play a couple of games of Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War because I picked that up when it went on sale a few weeks ago on PC because it was like $20 off, and Call of Duty games never go on sale. So I got it, and I was like, I'm gonna play a couple of multiplayer games, and I queued up to play, and it tells you who, like, what console they're on, the other people in your lobby, and it's all PlayStation and Xbox people. I didn't see a single other PC person in those two games I played, which I thought was kind of funny.
Did you wreck them? Did you win?
The first game went very well for me. The second game did not go very well for me, so I don't know.
So it's just Call of Duty still.
It's just Call of Duty, yeah. I don't know.
Yeah,
I haven't
nice.
played it. I don't have a big enough sample size to know if mouse and keyboard versus controller is a big deal or not. Because it's connection-based matchmaking, right? It's not skill-based. If it's skill-based, then I just assume that that'll all magically work itself out. Like I'll get put against Xbox people who are very good on controller, or against PC people who are bad on mouse and keyboard. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know how it works either. But I wanna play the campaign of that game.
Yeah, me too.
I like the Call of Duty campaigns, and I think Cold War would be cool. So, Cold War is cool. Okay, we got emails to read.
Yeah.
Do you want to read Will's email first?
Sure. Will says, "Good morning, Mike and Tyler. I am responding to your call to action. I was very excited you are doing this series on Metroid," I think is what he's referring to, or at least just the original, because Metroid is possibly my all-time favorite Nintendo franchise. I've played through all the mainline releases, including Hunters, which is not good, except for Return of Samus. I'm going to have to borrow someone's 3DS and give that one a try. Yes, you are. That game is excellent. To answer a couple of questions you posed, Metroid is on the Switch NES emulator, and Super Metroid is on the Super NES emulator. Zero Mission is definitely the best way to go for the first one, however. I have played the other M as well. It and Skyward Sword felt like the only major releases on the Wii in the late years. Coincidentally, both got mixed reviews from my friend group. M's gameplay is still fantastic, the game looks great for a Wii game, and the soundtrack slaps. The problem is the plot and dialogue. The game story makes no sense, and not in the fun JRPG kind of way. Worse, they butcher Samus's character. She whines way too much. It was enough to put some people off because it can distract from the experience. I would recommend giving it a playthrough and seeing what you think. Unfortunately, after Prime 3, Nintendo doesn't seem to know what to do with the franchise. Hopefully 4 changes that. Sorry about the long email. I am very passionate about this subject. Keep up the great work. Thanks, Will. I would love to play Other M. That's one that is like on my list of backlog games to play, because I think with the benefit of hindsight of like knowing that it wasn't received very well and knowing that it has a few problems in it, I think I can go back and just play it for what it is, not for what I hoped it was when it came out, you know? I think sometimes going back and playing games like that, you could be like, no, this game was actually pretty cool when you play it for what it was and not for what you wanted it to be. So maybe it'll be good. So I will check that out. I also hope that Prime 4 is better than the other Metroid games. So anyway, thanks, Will.
What and Prime 4 comes out on Switch, right?
Yep.
Oh, awesome. That's maybe when I jump in and then I get obsessed and then I go back to the old ones. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Let's read this email from Nate. Nate says, I was sitting in my 8 a.m. today, beyond tired, and my professor told us to imagine a product that would sell like hotcakes and gangbusters. I, of course, chuckled and thought of you guys. Keep up the good work, Nate. Thank you, Nate.
Oh, thanks, Nate. We haven't had I feel like we haven't said that in a while. Hotcakes and gangbusters. Games that sell well sell like hotcakes and gangbusters.
They really do. They sell like, oh man, that's so. I'm glad we have a catchphrase. It feels good.
Yeah,
it feels good.
Yeah.
All right, so this next email, it's got a couple parts to it, and then I am going to read the final question and paraphrase it because it's a long question. So, first part, Michael says, I'm very much here for Castlevania anything. Well, that's great. You could do a whole Castlevania podcast and I'd tune in. We just did. Isn't that awesome? That's for
Hope you tuned in.
This is from Mike in Philly, by the way. I beat Symphony of Night earlier this year and realized there are so many extremely difficult games that I breezed through due to the save states afforded by emulation. That is such a good point.
Yeah. Yes, save states make some games like actually playable. When I was in college, a bunch of friends of mine and I played through all of the original Battletoads on Sega Genesis on an emulator with save states. We played it 2 players. We played the co-op version, but we had a third person just managing save states and loads. And that was like a whole job to itself, was making sure you didn't save at the wrong time and then being quick to load when it was clear that we were about to fail. It was a lot of fun. That was a good way to play a 2-player game with 3 players.
Yeah, Mike says, how can any child beat these games on their native platforms is crazy to me. Like, yeah, it seems insane. I thought about that too when I was playing some of the Switch emulators on their Nintendo Online service. Mike goes on to say, I'm playing through Metal Gear, the OG Nintendo one, on my handheld emulator, which if you aren't aware of these things, they're like $60 and can handle up to including N64 ROMs. So fun. Mine is the Odroid Go Advanced Black Edition. I'm going to look that up.
Those things are so cool. I would be very tempted to buy one if it had a second joystick, but they only have one joystick on them. And that's a little bit of a deal breaker for me. But if they did, but it's still very, very cool. And $60 is like,
that's
for
nothing.
like an actual piece of hardware is, yeah, that's a great deal.
That's awesome. Okay, so the first Metal Gear is surprisingly fun and playable. I'm tickled knowing Kojima was behind this super cute iteration of Metal Gear, and then remembering he's behind Death Stranding is a testament to his creative genius over the years. I've never played Death Stranding. Is like a completely different thing, isn't it? It's like just... Have you played it?
It's totally different. It's Norman Reedus is like the main guy in it. And yeah, I haven't played it. I love Metal Gear Solid, but I don't think I would call myself a Kojima fan. I think I would just call myself a Metal Gear Solid fan because like Death Stranding is too weird for me. I'm not sure I can really get into it. And I haven't really played any of his other games.
You know what? When I get out of school, I might try to get weird and play it out of curiosity because I'm wondering now. Okay, so
you should.
Mike goes on to say, thanks for the Metroid Zero Mission recap. I tried playing the original Nintendo one, and as Tyler said, it was rough. Thanks for the reliability, enjoyable podcast. Keep up the good work, Mike and Philly. Thank you, Mike. So Mike also has another question here that I'm like purposefully holding off of because it's a pretty deep question, and we've thought about it quite a bit. Because we're in the middle of doing a Call of Duty history series. Tyler's been fronting that and doing all the work on it. And Mike's question brings up a good point. And it is, why do we glorify war in video games? And is that okay? And then, so let's start with there. Okay. Because what's funny is I've been racking my brain the last week or so after this question was posed, and I can't think of a good reason, even though I play these games a lot.
Yeah, same thing. And because I've been playing through, like I said, just today I played through about 5 missions of Modern Warfare 2, and it like violent. It's not just violence in video games because that's a conversation you can have too of like, is that okay?
We're talking about
maybe
war,
it isn't.
Right.
But war specifically is like a very specific subset of that violence, where like I think nobody really goes to war for fun, and people like really die in war. Like bad stuff happens in war, and then we go and play video games where it's like, yeah, this is all fun, and like sometimes you get a Spec Ops The Line or some of the Call of Duties can kind of feel a little bit like, this is where they sort of make you feel bad for playing a war game. But ultimately, those games are fun, right? You're not really meant to come away from them like being sad. You're just meant to think about it a little extra. And so I can't come up with a good reason. And like, part of me is just like, well, I've never been to war. Maybe I'm able to have fun with a game like this because I don't know the reality. And is that okay? And that's a good question. And one that I don't know if I have I don't know if I have an answer for it.
I 100% agree with you. And I think it's because we're kind of, we're kind of numb to it because it's like an American glorification of war ever since we're kids.
Yep.
Like, and it's been like that. I mean, I remember like growing up in the 90s, it was like true hero. Like, it's like, I don't want to compare it to something, but I have to make wrap my brain around it. It kind of reminds me of Starship Troopers, the movie, like that, like you're a hero, like be out. And it's just like, so when you play these games, you don't really think about it in the context of this is a terrible, terrible thing. You think about it in the context of like, oh, heroes, here we go. And it's like, it's not okay. It isn't okay. And it's never been okay. And like you said, with those like Call of Duty quotes at the end, trying to make it okay. It's like, yeah, I mean, it's making me think about it, but also you're making $60 a pop on each of these games and you sell millions and millions of copies. So you're definitely making money off of war.
Right. And we're not giving you money and we're not like feeling sad by playing these games. Like, yeah, I think about it a little extra. I'm like, yeah, that's deep. And like, yeah, this is, war is terrible. And then I get out my freaking AK-47 and start shooting bad guys again, and like it doesn't stop me from playing the game. So
yeah, and I think about Spec Ops. I didn't even think about Spec Ops The Line. That adds a whole new dimension on it because Spec Ops The Line's whole point is about like, I mean, I didn't go into minor spoiler territory, but think about like what you're doing when you're out there, and why are you fighting and what are you fighting for? And it's like, it's just, yeah, I can't think of a good answer. I guess the answer is it's not okay, but it's not enough to stop me from playing, which doesn't make me sound like a good person, but that's the honest truth.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, the version that we're playing to is like Call of Duty is not exactly known as a realistic war simulator, right? Like I'm not under the illusion that this is what really happens in war. Like it's like an action movie, but in video game form, right? And we watch action movies about this kind of stuff all the time, knowing that, yeah, people in action movies use guns and shoot each other, and like it's all fun for the movie, knowing that in real life that really happens and people really die. It's like, it's just a separation thing that I'm okay with it, even if I can't adequately explain why I'm having fun playing the game, you know?
Yeah, and also it's because, I mean, the first-person shooter as a genre works so well for that whole theme. That It's like, how are you going to have a first-person shooter game and not talk about war? Like, even when you're talking about something as like Halo, where you're shooting aliens or whatever, it's like, it's really hard to avoid that. Yeah. So I just thought this was a really good question. I was like, this is a very good question.
I do too. And I also think, like, if you don't like games that like are based on war and you don't have fun playing them, I think that is a totally valid opinion to have. Like if somebody said, yeah, I just don't really like playing Call of Duty because I don't like war things, I'd be like, yep, I get it. Makes sense.
100%. Totally makes sense. Yep. The second part of this question, I mean, I feel like we've answered that question, but the answer was just really upsetting. Is the whole, I'm calling it the dude bro dilemma of the audience that has been attracted to this style of game is so different from when I first started playing video games online in like the early Halo 2 games, I guess you could say, or Halo 3. And if like why that's a case is it's a good and bad, because the good thing is video games are reaching a wider audience than they have ever reached before, which is awesome. The bad news is a certain subset of that audience, I believe, is raised with the competitive mentality of sports. And that competitive mentality is causing the toxicity that you see online today.
Yeah. And I don't think it's definitely not unique to Call of Duty games. I think it's games that get popular that have a competitive element are going to attract the kind of person that is not fun to play games with on occasion. And I wouldn't say there are more or less toxic people in a Call of Duty game than there are in something else that's also competitive. You know what I mean?
Definitely. And I also, I am also like 100% believe into the stereotype of a lot of this, at least the toxicity that I've seen. And I know from people that I know are not afraid to push buttons online and be that guy. It's like people I knew that were super into sports, and then you hit a certain point where you're like, I am physically incapable of keeping up with the professional or college athletes that we're at. I need to find another outlet. And that outlet just happens to be a video game, or it could be a hobby. It could be bowling or whatever, you know?
Yeah, you'll find those people in competitive bowling too.
Yeah, it's that personality. And I think because video games are so accessible, it attracts that personality to them. And that's why you get angry messages on Xbox Live. We just solved it. That's
why. There you go. And in a competitive sense too, you're playing with those people, so you have to interact with them. Like maybe some of those people are also playing single player games, but it doesn't matter to me because they're a single player and they're not getting mad at me personally and they're not talking to me personally, right?
Definitely. And there's also so many people that don't do that. There's some people that just don't talk and they're fine.
That's right.
And you just
and it only takes, even if it's 5% of the people that are terrible to play with, if the other 95% just don't say anything and are just generally not bad to play with, you only remember the people who are bad to play with.
Exactly. Know? This goes back to my existential crisis in WoW 2 weeks ago when I was like, why is everyone in this game so mean? But it's not everyone. Yeah. It's just we happen to run into a few ding-dong games where they're acting like ding-dongs.
Yeah, and it's just about like, I don't know, I just stopped caring what anybody else thinks, you know? Just doesn't bother me anymore.
Yeah, it's true. I think I need to not let it bother me so much. But those are two very good points and questions from Mike and Philly. So thank you for sending those to us, Mike. And now we should mention this. We got a ton of emails, which is awesome. We got a lot of emails over the last couple, I guess this week. We got a ton. So we're only reading 3 today. If you sent us an email already, we will read them in the next podcasts. Just so you know, it's just we're taking our time because we got a lot of emails. So don't feel sad. We're gonna read your email. I promise.
We'll get there. We'll get to it.
We'll get to it. It's just a lot for one episode, and so I didn't want to read like 8 emails. Okay, so we do have a new review though that I'm gonna read before we leave.
Okay.
This is from OMG. It's Cameron on Apple Podcasts. It says, awesome podcast, 5 stars. I drive truck, so I listen to a lot of podcasts, and this one is my favorite. Great banter between the two hosts. Informative, funny. It's the complete package. Did you know we're the complete package, Tyler? That's awesome.
The complete package. Wow.
Yeah, that's right. I've listened through the whole show twice already. What?
Wow.
Wow, Cameron. OMG, it is Cameron. That is bananas. Good job. And I'm sure there'll be many more times I do this. Regular episodes come out weekly, which I think is just great since these two guys don't run ads in the show, meaning they are doing this show because of a passion for video games, not because of the money. Keep up the great work, guys, and shout out to Toby, the producer. May defeat come swiftly to your Jaybird opponents. Thank you, Cameron, for the very nice review. Tyler, make sure to shout out Toby, will you?
I will. I will definitely do that.
And he'll say that, and then Toby will immediately turn his computer off because that's what Toby does.
Yep, he does that.
All right, but that is the episode for today. Are we going back into Call of Duty next week or Metroid, Tyler? Which one are we going to?
I don't know. We'll flip a coin and we'll find out.
Ooh, surprises, cliffhangers.
Yeah.
I love it. All right, well, thank you so much for listening. And do you want to say bye to everybody, Tyler?
I will. Goodbye, everybody.